Lucky, I wear this yellow scarf whenever I do talks. Triratna sandal the scarf. It's become a regular. Okay, so yeah, we're carrying on with the theme of interconnectedness. And then I thought we'd start with a bit of a recap in case some people missed the first week, but it'll just be a really short recap. And then I'll talk more about where we'll go after that. So yeah, so Naravira has already really set the scene in week 1, talking through the Gandhavyuha Sutra in lots of detail, in a good way, which is part of the Avatamsaka, the flower ornament sutra, and the text is, the scriptures are on the shrine. So the main aspect of this was about Sudana's experience in Barochana's tower, where he saw many worlds, and he saw that the tower contained the whole of phenomenal universe and the entirety of space and all the beings. And within that tower, there were lots of smaller towers, lots of smaller towers, and within each tower was an array in each direction, reflected all the other towers, if that makes sense as an image. A bit like Indra's net, basically. So this week, I'll mainly be exploring this area through images, different images that are used to evoke the Gandhavyuha Sutra, and poetry, and a lot from Bhante as well. So you hear a lot of quotes from Bhante. I've been building towers around me, completely covered in the complete works, and everyone knows how big those books are. So I feel like I've been in a tower for about 3 weeks doing this talk. And after doing the complete works, I really didn't need to look anywhere else because there's a lot there. Yeah, thanks to Satchalila and her amazing indexing. So images, poetry, Bhante, and I thought like poetry in particular is quite helpful because they can get us a bit closer to the felt experience. And maybe it's possible with the interconnectedness theme, we can become a bit metaphysical, a bit intellectual, and obviously we need an embodied felt experience as well. Poetry can help with that. And also I'll be looking at the elements in the natural world, the body, and meditation practice as well. So it shouldn't take as long as it sounds. Maybe about half an hour, 45 minutes, and we'll have time for a short sit later. So starting with the first quote from Bhante. So this is from Eternal Legacy, Wisdom Beyond Words. So the doctrine of emptiness means that no such thing as a separate entity exists. There is nothing which is really and truly and absolutely separate and itself. We're in the habit of chopping reality into bits, distinguishing one thing from another. This is this, that is that. Then we start preferring this to that. We choose this rather than that. We stick to this and reject that, which is where we go wrong. And this is the whole of the Buddhist tradition speaking. It is not that we are meant to see things as one exactly, reducing all difference to unity, or somehow blotting out the difference. It is rather a question of seeing things as being in some way interfused. So throughout this, I'll use the word interfused, interconnection, and interpenetration, and that's the same thing, it's just it's used. They all have inter. So the two images, because different images speak to different people, and you can see how each one lands on you. So the two images are interwoven fabric and beams of light. So firstly, interwoven fabric. So Sangharakshita crossing the stream. Everything depends for its existence upon other things, and so on until all threads of existence, physical, mental, moral, and spiritual, are knot together in a single, interrelated, interconnected, interdependent fabric. Nothing is aloof or single, nothing isolated, nothing separate. A flower blooms in dependence on the whole universe, and the whole universe exists in dependence on the flower. That's the first image. Seeing how that lands. And then the second, beams of light. So it's maybe touched a little bit on the first talk. Comparing reality to beams of light. So the reality of things are like intersecting beams of light. So if you imagine all beams of light of all different colors, kind of needs to be infinite shades, flashing in all directions, crossing, crisscrossing. So one beam of light doesn't obstruct the other. So imagine you're a beam of light, maybe choose your shade, color. Yeah. So one beam of light shines through another beam of light, but it doesn't obstruct you, doesn't obstruct the others. So they shine through one another. They're not lost or merged. They don't become one great light, just one color. They might kind of maintain their separate individualities, their separate colors. And they are mutually interpenetrating. So we can see that reality, when we see into reality, it's a bit like this. So you see things as interfusing and interpenetrating one another. So there's unity and individuality. By individuality, I mean in the true individual, as apart from individualistic. So that's another image. You know, maybe the threads or the light, one of them speaks to you, this interconnectedness. So Sangharakshita again, a survey of Buddhism. No phenomena arises without a cause, and that things exist not in isolation, but connected with every other thing in the universe, so that each influences and acts upon all, and all influence and act upon each, is a cardinal principle of Buddhism. So going back to the beams of light. So if you imagine, say there's a red shade and a green shade. Someone's the red shade, someone's the green shade. So they're intersecting, they are affecting each other. Yeah. So maybe there's another shade that arises, but they still also maintain a true individuality. So, so I've got a bit of an example of this, just a personal one, kind of subtle example in relation to the body. I quite enjoy 5 rhythms dancing. And it's like a move, if you haven't done it, it's a movement meditation. You don't, you pair up at times. It's interesting because I quite like dancing on my own, but then you're invited to pair up and be with these other people, these other colors, yeah. If you're staying with the light image. You don't have to touch, you don't have to have contact, but you do this movement, yeah, and you lightly led through a meditation, movement meditation. So I was there and I got quite in touch with, when I was dancing independently and moving, I got in touch with, just a sense of shame, sadness and regret over something that I'd done. And I was really wanting to just be by myself. Then the pair work came and I just found someone paired with me. And I had to really work with not breaking off from that person. Yeah, just being kind of almost wanting to be in my own little place, you know, solidifying into myself. So peer work wasn't what I wanted, as I was feeling closed in my experience, but I made the intention to be curious and a little bit open and a little bit receptive. I remember just thinking, Maitrijyoti, just see, you know. So I encouraged myself. So remaining a little bit open, a little bit receptive, I was able to allow my colour to be interpenetrated by someone else's for these 2 minutes. And this shifted and affected the way I was within about this short time of practice. And a part of that as well, it was a guy, and I noticed that I was avoiding eye contact, so I felt I was filling up with tears and getting embarrassed. And then I was avoiding looking, and I looked and I clocked that he responded to that with kind of warmth and shifted and started like dancing a bit more softly. Yeah, it was only a couple of seconds. And then I responded, he responded, really subtle. Like I say, we're both silent. It's quite, you know, it's like about 2 meters distance, 1 meter distance. So I'd say we coloured and perfumed each other whilst remaining present and aware. So I think we can get an embodied sense of interconnectedness with other people. And it can be on a subtle body and intuitive level. And maybe it's through dance, maybe it's through music. Sometimes when two people play music together, something happens between those two people. Sometimes it can happen in communication, maybe through poetry or through art. So, Sangharakshita, another quote from poems and short stories. At one stage, it was as though the rhythm that arose within me was the same as, or at least in accordance with, the rhythm that arose within the depths of external nature and found expression in trees, flowers, houses, and human beings, in the whole order of existence. So, yeah. Sorry, I quite like that. Of course, when he's talking about rhythm, he's talking about poetry, or maybe a vibration sense. Again, it goes back to that felt, embodied, intuitive feeling rather than a thinking of interconnectedness in a more metaphysical, intellectual way. And then further, so Sangharakshita explains that strictly speaking, though, it's not a mere attitude or tendency of mind. And this is, quote, but something more fundamental, constituting the very ground of one's being. That is to say, a field where a person in the profoundest sense lives and moves and has his or her reason of existence. This field is essentially determined by the depth and clarity of one's spiritual intuitions. And I underline spiritual intuitions. I guess a question or an area we can explore within groups is, when do we feel we have that intuitive sense of interconnectedness? Yeah. So the next area I was going to talk about is the elements of the natural world. So this is an Alan Watts quote, which I particularly like. You didn't come into this world, you came out of it, like a wave from the ocean. You are not a stranger here. So to say it again, you didn't come into this world, you came out of it, like a wave from the ocean. You were not a stranger here. So like a wave from the ocean, you can think, well, where does the ocean end and the wave begin? And where's the wave without the ocean and the ocean without the wave? I think it points to an interconnectedness, interfusion in nature. There's not a line where they begin and end. And between us as beings and other species, the elements, maybe there's, we can imagine there's less of a line. Can we be in touch of there being less of a line between us and them? A bit like the wave. So the elements can lend well to this because there's that fluidity and air, perfume, all these sort of images and poetry and nature. I think it can lend well to this truth. And also, you were not a stranger here. So sometimes we can feel a stranger in our very disconnected experience and quite alone. Well, I can if I'm not in a good place. And I'm sure we've all experienced that when we're not in contact with a sense of connection, maybe even on quite a basic level as well. So I was going to talk a little bit about a personal example. And so as a child, I took really great comfort in the natural world. So there was quite difficult times that arose when I was about 8, and my home was quite safe, steady and stable. And then it became a little bit chaotic as my mum was quite unwell. And my dad was very loving and did his very best bringing up 3 children. It was really difficult for some years. And I really remember I spent a lot of time, hours, sitting on my windowsill. I had one of those windowsills that you could sit on. It was wide enough for a bum, a child's bum. And I'd sit on my windowsill in my bedroom and look out at the rain and the storm. I still have quite an affinity to rain and storms, until I got a bit numb, And I found that quite comforting. So there was a deep knowing, even then, that the elements were pointing to something deeper. Partly they were mirroring an inner experience, because I liked it if it was chaotic elements. And partly it was, I remember wishing and wondering then, I think I had a hunch. It's like, I think there's one little boy out there going through the same as me. So I guess we can be connected on our experience of dukkha, and the context just changes. These big themes, grief, shame, the context of the dukkha may be different, but it's still dukkha. We are connected in our feeling of pain. And I felt like I was in touch with this small faith. Maybe that was beginnings of a little bit of faith, that there was someone out there that could connect to this experience of dukkha. And even into adulthood, this is really significant to me, the elements, the natural world. So I haven't done it recently, but there would be periods in my life, difficult chapters. I think there would be about a few times a year, I would just drive to the South Wales coast, sit on the rocks and look out to sea for as many hours as I could manage. And my problems it felt like small mind went into big mind, and I just had this bigger perspective. So when we disconnected, our perspective is really narrow and it's really inward. It felt like almost quite maternal, like an embrace of a good parent, like a greater wisdom was there. And I felt more connected. I did feel more connected to the universe, which sounds like a big thing to say, but the ocean's so vast and the sky is so vast. It's only one step up and you're in the universe. And also there was a sense of sameness of experience. other people feel this, I can be more in contact with that perspective. So maybe this truth of interconnection is always there if we uncover the veils and see this deeper reality. There's a knowing within us, and we can get in touch with that at-home feeling that may arise. And maybe we don't feel like such a stranger. Yeah. So also I guess I could say that the elements are always in intimate, interconnected relationship with me, but can I be in intimate, interconnected relationship with them in the world? So that it's always there, and it's about openness and receptivity. So another quote from Sangharakshita: since everything in the universe reflects and is in turn reflected by every other thing, the Buddha nature is mirrored in the depths not only of every human heart, but in every grain of dust and blade of grass that is. So I'm going to read a poem on that now. So this is from poem Short Stories. It's called Night Thoughts. So across the vastness of sky, white continents of cloud are spread. From bank to bank the moon doth ply, with silver traffic overhead. Below me is a single world, above 10,000 million are. The moon her silver sail has furled, to anchor near the morning star. Each world a million lives contains, yet all with all are one. The humblest flower of grass that thrives is sister to the regnant sun. I particularly like the humblest flower of grass that thrives is sister to the regnant sun. Somehow echoing, we can feel quite small in our experience, and then we're sister to this big vast sun. Yeah. So I'm going to talk a bit about meditation and reflective practice. So I was introduced, so Dhyajoti suggested doing this. We were out on a walk and she said, can I test something out on you? I was like, yeah. Didn't know what she was going to test out. I probably should ask people. Anyway, so she said, can I test something out? And then she tried something. I guess she'd go in much more detail about this. But it was a bit of a meditation reflective practice, walking meditation maybe. So I'll say more about my experience of that in a moment. So basically it was whilst we were walking, this is how I've kind of adapted it into something that works for me as a walking meditation. So as I'm walking, I imagine that the earth I'm walking on is my skin and my bones. So imagining the sense of self expanding out into the external world. That makes sense? And I guess you can look at the sense of self in different ways, can't you? You can think of breaking down the sense of self, realizing there's no fixed and changing your essence, or expanding the sense of self into more and more other. So it's playing with that. This is me. So as walking, this earth is me, this is me, this is me. Yeah? And then what I was completely struck by, probably because I like the water element and rain so much, as it started raining, it just felt like, this is me, this is me. Feel like your blood, my tears, this is me, this is me. And then the air, the breath, this is me, this is me. And it kind of lends well to this interconnectedness with the natural world, where the self is expanding out to more other in terms of the elements. And I found this quite helpful because you can do this going to the shop. You don't need to be out on a beautiful walk. You could do it on the pavement. You can do it, it's mainly raining and windy in England, isn't it? So you can do it a lot. And you can do it if you're busy. Yeah. So I feel really grateful for her introducing me to that. And she'd be able to pad it out much more fully. She's doing a talk in a couple of weeks. You may not come into that. So seeing the rain as my tears, the wind as my breath, the earth as my skin, that angle on this self becoming more and more other. And a quote from Sangharakshita: the individual self is a center from which lines of discrimination radiate in all directions. It is the innermost citadel of separateness. Only when this center expands to infinity, only when the walls of this citadel are razed to the ground, is the consummation of the spiritual life achieved. Liberation is not so much of the self as from the self. So liberation is not so much of the self as from the self. The whole conception of attainment is fundamentally wrong. One has simply to break down the barriers of his separate individuality and allow himself to be penetrated by everything that exists. Then he himself will penetrate everything. This mutual penetration is liberation, is happiness. So I thought now we could do a bit of meditative practice, reflective practice. And I'll say another poem at the end. So get really comfy, maybe even lie on the floor. So you'll have a real sense of the earth and maybe your back on the floor. And get blankets, really build yourself a nest. And everyone at home, really build yourself a nest. Because the ground can be really cold, can't it? First of all, just really coming in contact with the body, how it feels today. Inviting all aspects of your being, all colours, to come and join you in your practice. Being aware of the earth element. So the earth element in the body. bones, the muscles, any other area of the body that speaks earth to you. Bringing awareness to the earth element beneath you. From the feet, the weight of the pelvis. How does it feel to be in close contact with the earth element beneath you? To be connected to you. And bringing awareness to the water element. Water element inside the body. The water element outside the body. The rivers, and the soil itself. Reflecting on the life-giving aspect of the water element, connection, water. Bringing awareness to the air element. The air inside the body. Filling the lungs front and back. How the air moves the body. And the air element around us outside the body. Reflecting that just as you are breathing, so too are other living beings, sharing the same air. bringing awareness to the fire element inside the body. Maybe there's warmth, areas of different temperature, heat. Maybe it feels like there's a fire near or around the heart. It's more of an emotional fire. Reflecting on the fire element outside the body. Maybe imagining a fire, or even the sun. Giving heat and life, and sharing that heat and life with all beings on earth. Bringing to awareness the space element. So a sense of space inside the body. In the diaphragm, pelvic bowl. Maybe it's more an intuitive sense of space inside the body. Then moving to our sense of space outside the body. Sense of space between us. Then broadening out as far as the mind wants to to a sense of space above you, maybe into the universe. Reflecting that we share the same material elements with all beings, all life, all animals, plants. Night thoughts, the Sangharakshita. Across the vastness of the sky, white continents of cloud are spread. From bank to bank, the moon doth ply. There's silver traffic overhead. Below me is a single world. Above 10,000 millionaire. The moon her silver sail has furled to anchor near the morning star. Each world a million lives contains, yet all with all are one. The humblest flower of grass that thrives is sister to the reckoned sun. So do take your time to unravel from your lying down position. We'll have a 20-minute tea break. And like Triratna said earlier, we encourage people online to stay together, build Sangha, get your cup of tea and come back to the wider group online. And you may wish to start reflecting on some of the areas that came up already in the talk. But we will go into breakout groups later, so you'll have an extended time as well later. We'll all come back together at the end. It's a 20-minute break.